By going into the shadow, you bring out its light and its gift, and you can only meet another as deeply as you have met yourself.
Letting go, yeah, it isn't easy. Two hearts slowly breaking, living the highs and lows, I'm keeping busy. Don't know if we're worth saving. Are we meant to be, or are we second guessing? Would you stay with me if the world was ending?
My soul back kicked in. I was like, what's good and welcome to it. My name is Solow and welcome to the SolowSays YouTube channel. Welcome back to my channel. I firstly want to thank you so much for choosing to spend some time with me, but you already know how this goes. If you do like my vibe, please do subscribe, like, and comment and all that good stuff, because the love that you send to me, I send right back at you. Solo, where we at? We in the bedroom. I know you saw, hopefully, in my previous video, I was solo hike, so I'll probably leave something for it up here, and you can go check that out. It was really fun that day, but now we back to the basics, back inside, where we can woosah, you know, breathe. And I'm burning some incense. I have my candle lit, so the vibes are the nicest. It's raining outside. It's a beautiful day to talk about your shadow side. No, I'm kidding. But behind every joke is a bit of truth. Yeah, so if you can see by today's video's title, we are talking about shadow work, what shadow work is, and getting into the little nitty bits and grits of it. I did speak about it on my podcast, and well, this is a beautiful time to plug my podcast. If you do want to listen to my podcast, do give it a listen. I'll leave the links for everything in the description box down below, so you can go check that out. On this season of SolowSays podcast, we're talking mind, body, spirit. So yeah, and I just dropped a podcast episode last week, so you'll be so keen for that as well if you just go give that a listen. But anyways, yes, I did speak about shadow work on one of my podcast episodes in my third season of SolowSays podcast. But I thought, you know what, let me come and deliver the content in the body, in the flesh, and that is what we're going to be doing today. So if you are interested in that, do stick around. But without further ado, let's get into it. Okay, so shadow work. I want to start off with a quote, because that's what I usually do, and then take it from there. So today's quote says, by going into the shadow, you bring out its light and its gift, and you can only meet another as deeply as you have met yourself. I find those quotes so stimulating mentally, and they offer so much depth into what we're going to be talking about. The first quote that says, by going into the shadow, you can bring out its light. On my YouTube channel, on my podcast, I am very intentional about talking on things that deal with healing, things that deals with spirituality, things that deals with mental health. And shadow work is an aspect that ticks all of those boxes, because shadow work in the spiritual community is about facing your shadow side, and that is the side of you that is deemed as your ego, the one you keep in the dark, and you have certain spiritual attributes that are attached to that person, you know, jealousy, ego, malice, vengeance, hatefulness, regret, remorse, victim consciousness, all those things. And then when you go into mental health, it's kind of the side of you that's self-sabotage, the side of you that is also maybe resentful, the side of you that is unforgiving, the side of you that continuously plays certain roles that continuously hurts yourself and keeps you stuck. And as Queen Latoya Okia says, broke, busted, and disgusted. So the shadow triples in all aspects of your life. And no, shadow work is not the devil's business. When I first started to hear about shadow work, for me, it was kind of this far-fetched thing. Like, oh my God, am I going to be like doing ceremonies? Like, is it dark? Like, am I gonna be giving my blood? You know, like it was a very like far-fetched, I had a very far-fetched ideology of what shadow work actually is. And when I started getting into it and learning more about it and doing the various research on it, I discovered that it is something that you can do, I can do so casually. And when you hear about it, you're gonna kick yourself and be like, Solow, You didn't tell me it was that basic, child. It's basic 101 on getting yourself from point A to B to see yourself to glory. So by doing this work, being a spiritual warrior, because that is exactly what is going to require of you, to be courageous, to be strong, and to face the opposition that is you. So by being a spiritual warrior and going into the deepest parts of yourself, you help transform not only yourself, but the culture, and it helps transforms the hearts of those around you. You learn to take responsibility for all sides of self. And what you don't face, you pass on to the next generation. We can body within. What we can body within, we can model without. So that's a lot that I just said there. But number one, by doing the shadow work, you help transform yourself. Shadow work, as I will get into, are a bunch of questions that you read, and it helps stimulate your mind to think in different ways and to bring out different parts of yourself that you might have kept hidden. Not only does that transform you, but it transforms the people around you. By me doing my shadow work, I now know what some of my triggers are, and I now know why I respond to certain things in a certain way. So by me being aware of my actions and aware of the way that I speak to people, I am then responsible for how I carry myself in different situations. And instead of exploding in people's faces or giving them, the Crimea River situation, I am able to take responsibility for myself, and in turn it affects a whole bunch of things. And you also teach people how to act, and what you can model within, you model without, and you become an example for those around you. But I'm getting ahead of myself, so let's keep going into what I wrote. Your shadow is born in your childhood as a byproduct of certain interactions. So how you can look at it, how your shadow is developed. As human beings, we are born onto this planet pure, just straight out of glory, you understand, divine beings, and we never lose our divinity, but we merely forget. So the shadow is when you are a child and you are growing up. And how I can relate it to myself, the way that my shadow showed up, is that sensitivity is not a curse. Being someone who's sensitive, being someone who's intuitive, being someone that just feels a whole lot of things is not a curse. But in this world that we live in currently, and I do stand to be corrected, but in this world there are a lot of people who are operating in a masculine prototype. Is that the word? But a lot of people who choose to embody the energy of masculinity. Now, there's nothing wrong with masculinity, because we have both femininity and masculinity within all of us. But when one deems the other one as weaker, then it becomes a problem. So in this world, we have people who are like, don't do this, don't do that, because it's seen as weak. Growing up, I am still a person who indulges in tears. I watch something and I cry. Yeah, I cry. Like I'm not ashamed to say that I cry. Like I like to cry. But I grew up with people who would look at that crying and be like, stop crying. Shush. There's nothing to cry about. That fear of, if you're crying, I'll give you something to cry about. So as a child, in those moments now when you want to cry, or when I wanted to cry, I had to stop myself from crying. So then I had to build a character in defense of the true me. So your shadow is not something that you should despise or fear looking into, but it is merely the part of you that helped you survive in certain situations. It is a byproduct of the interactions that you had with people. So for example, if you were a child and you didn't have this mentality of taking what doesn't belong to you, but because you were around people who would take your things, and if you were not quick enough to take other people's things, you would be, at the end of the stick, the bad part of the stick. So when you grow up, you learn to be You learn to be maybe greedy. You learn to take more than what you should have. You learn to do other people dirty. You understand? Just because that's what you learned in the interactions with the people around you. Sometimes, you grow up with people who might have been narcissistic, because that's quite a trait that goes around these days, narcissism. But no licensed practitioner here. I'm not diagnosing anybody, but you grow up in a family system that is not ideal, and you learn enmeshment, you learn to be codependent. And now that's not who you are innately, because you were not born to be codependent. You were not born to live off of other people's emotions, but because your family system taught you that was was what was respectable, or that was what you guys were supposed to do. You end up doing that, and lo and behold, your shadow is born. So, number one, there are different ways of healing trauma in life, and it's not one size fits all. So shadow work is something that I truly found beneficial, but it was not the only thing that I used, as I continue to say. So it is not the only thing that people should look to get themselves healed, quote unquote. But healing is a never-ending journey, and it goes on forever and ever and ever. But yeah, healing is a never-ending journey, but it is merely just different phases of our lives that we learn to accept and then on to the next, because the Bible says in this world you will face trials and tribulations, so no one can escape the duality of earth. But in the bigger scheme of things, shadow work does help you come into understanding of parts of yourself that you might have been condemning, or parts of this yourself that you chose to keep down low. You understand? So when I speak about the shadow work, it's not like, okay, let me do shadow work and then everything's gonna be solved, but it is definitely something that you can use on your journey that is going to help you, because everything will work out for your good at the end of the day if you apply it and if you are sincere about what you do. So next thing, I learned about shadow work through various ways. I've always been someone seeking, you understand, and when you are on a spiritual journey, you listen to different people talk about different things, and you understand where they come from and stuff like that, and then they throw something in. So thank you, YouTube. But I learned about shadow work through YouTube, and then I started to do the work myself. And there are plenty of videos just like this one on YouTube that you can probably look into that will give you the necessary information you need for doing shadow work. And that's how I found me. Number two, so shadow work is when you journal about repressed emotions or uncover things that might not be on your conscious mind, stuff that you have hid from yourself. So like I said, shadow work is not something that is deep, daunting, but it depends actually where you're coming from, because I cannot speak for everyone and I do not know everyone's traumas, but I can speak for myself and say that I have endured a lot of difficult things in my life thus far. And by doing the shadow work, I realized that the things that I caused upon myself, the toxic relationships that I found myself in, the toxic patterns and the places that took me nowhere but to stagnancy town, were a repercussion of the things that happened to me in my childhood. So there are questions in shadow work that a person does, and then at the end of it, it's like, oh, okay, now I see why I am so defensive of people who want to be close to me. Now I see why I push everyone away. Now I see why I am too clingy. And I see why I judge people based on their outward appearance. And yes, I might be no, I'm kidding. But yeah, shadow work is definitely a bunch of questions that you ask yourself and you journal them. So I can give you an example of a shadow work question that is asked. So something as simple as, are you happy to be alive? On face value, that question is like, yeah, I'm happy to be alive. But when you sit with yourself, you see it gets a bit. But let me give you another one that we can work on. What was the hardest thing you ever had to do, and how has it impacted you since? That's another question that you ask. These are not questions that we just, answer or ask ourselves on a daily basis. But what shadow work is, it's questions that prompt things in your mind that you are not consciously thinking of, and it brings the subconscious to the consciousness, and it helps you to be aware. Because if you are not aware of something, how do you know that you should alter that thing or fix that thing or do better on that thing? Another one is, if me today could talk to me 10 years ago, what would I say? Boy, oh boy, oh boy. Stay in school. No, I'm kidding. I stayed in school. What? You see, you have to think about it. Now it's like, and some of the questions, they do get really deep. Another one is like, how have I internalized my parents' judgments? That's another one. And that's a big one that a lot of people overlook sometimes, because we don't know how fearful we are of living our own lives and being true to ourselves, because we're always accommodating the viewpoints and the opinions of other people. Yes, there are the ones who love us. Yes, there are the ones who have taken care of us, but they are not perfect, and they too have not walked the journey to perfection. They too have their errors, and living your life in the shadow of another person is never living truly to yourself. So it's these type of questions that helps you get to the nitty gritty itty things of it. Because I've spoken to people in their 40s, their 50s, believe you me, that talk about how if only their mom believed in them, they live their whole life in regret for never living for themselves, but living instead in the shadow of their parents. So answering these questions, gets to the bottom. Another one is, what emotions do I really express to others, and when did I first start hiding these emotions? It comes back to the part where I was like crying. For me, I don't just cry. I don't go about the world just crying. If I cry with you, then you're one of the real ones. But like for most people, it's like, wow, Nata's such a happy person. Solow's such a happy person. She always, which I am. I am a very happy person. But it's like everybody has emotions and everybody has ups and downs, but it's very rarely that I felt comfortable expressing to people when I was sad or when I was feeling down, because it was that voice from the past that was like, don't cry, you understand, stop looking for attention. And then it plays out in my mind, and that first happened to me when I was a little child. So now that I have that understanding that as an adult, when I am with people and I'm required to show a certain emotion and be vulnerable, it becomes difficult because of something that was done in my childhood. Now there's a whole lot of, inner child healing that is done. So that's like a whole nother video. But now it makes you aware of the things that you keep deep down inside. And I will leave a link to some shadow work questions. I did post on my Instagram page at SolowSays on Instagram. It's got like a moon on it and the questions are there. So if you do want to get into it, you can go to those. But if you want to search it, feel free. There are so many videos on YouTube, and yeah, it is nothing to be fearful of, but it is merely just going into the depth of who you are. And that's something that we have to do, because being shallow can work for some people. But if you are on this journey with me, you are clearly someone who wants to be a better version of yourself. And in doing so, you cannot pick and choose which sides of yourself you choose to love, but you have to love yourself holistically, because each and every one of us are beautifully and wonderfully and fearfully made. And there's nothing actually imperfect, but it is more about just being the better version of yourself. So this, if you want to be better and you see that Solo, me, maybe starving myself every single day, it's a shadow and trigger response of who I am. I am not someone who has a bad relationship with food, but it is because of the opinions of other people and the work that has been done on me. My shadow chooses to now be someone who doesn't want to eat. So you see, it can affect you in so many different ways. Okay. It is important. Why it was important for me to learn shadow work, I wrote, is to unlearn certain mental patterns, to unlearn beliefs, to learn more about myself, good or bad, even if it hurts, because in the long run, I will thank myself for doing the work. And then I wrote, you have to be aware of what you were unaware of to identify why you respond in certain ways. So it comes back to everything that I was saying. I want to do shadow work, and we want to do shadow work is because we want to be the best versions of ourselves. And in doing that, there are certain things that we need to address. And shadow work is something that helps you intimately get in touch with those parts of yourself, and in the long run you will thank yourself like I thank myself. Another thing for me when it comes to shadow work was, one of the questions was like, what was the hardest thing that I had to do? And for me, it was putting myself first. For the longest time I was codependent, and I was always living up to what people wanted me to be, so in that energy of a people pleaser. And I am not ashamed to say that, because I have faced that inner me, and now I know God's got me, got my guys on me when I pull up. It's holy. But yeah, so now I am aware of those things. So it's not something suppressed that triggers me, but instead it's something that I embrace. And I'm like, yeah, that's a part of me. But I'm not, because I'm aware of it, I'm not choosing to act in that prototype or personality type, but instead I am choosing differently for myself. So for me, doing the shadow work has really helped uncover the parts of me that was suppressed, shunned upon. For the example, when people say don't cry, I already got into that, don't get angry, don't say that, don't hit people, it helps uncover the deeper truths of what makes us tick. So it comes back to everything that I said previously, that shadow work helps you identify the things that are suppressed, that you might have felt ashamed about, shunned about. And our shadow sometimes is not always deep. What if your shadow is someone who wants, for example, to be more courageous, more your shadow is something that makes you more timid, more tame, more submissive, but ideally you are a person who is courageous, outspoken, and bold. So doing the shadow work will help you uncover those parts of self. And then finally, some of the questions can be super deep or like really simple. Don't fear uncovering these truths about yourself, because if you cannot love and embrace all facets of self, how can anyone else? You can only meet another as deeply as you have met yourself. And I know that might scare you, because it's like, oh, whoa, what do you mean as deeply? Child, you know yourself. You know that there are parts of you that other people just simply don't see. You don't let some people in. You want to be mysterious. You want to act, I don't have feelings, tough as anything, which you probably are. But just like all of us, we are made of love, and love is at the center of us all, and that is all what we want. So if you cannot love and embrace yourself fully, flaws and all, another person will never be able to embrace you fully, flaws and all, because they will never see those flaws. So they'll never be able to understand what it is. Now I know my negative toxic traits, and when I enter a relationship, I can tell you straight up, this, that, and the third is about me. So if you don't like it, A, B, see yourself out of it, you understand? And now I'm aware of the things that I bring to the table, and I would appreciate if another person would do that with themselves. So when we enter a relationship and maybe there's a certain thing that I do that triggers them, they are able to come to me and be like, yo, Solo, child, when I was 6, there was someone who was super loud. You understand? I couldn't sleep. They were loud. And what you're doing is triggering me right now and making me frustrated. So could you woosah that? And then we can take it from there. I know it is not easy, and I'm saying these things casually, but believe you me, I did it. And if I can do it, you can do it too. Because you know what? Some things are far-fetched. Put on glory, glorified in a certain aspect. But sometimes it's as simple as ABC, 1, 2, 3, it's easy as ABC. Definitely. And yeah, shadow work is just that. I think it's very important for you to consider doing some shadow work questions. Just one question a week, one question a day, And in time, when you reflect and go back to the things that you wrote, it will be super beneficial for you to see how far you have come. So yeah, that's all Solo has to say for this YouTube video. If you do like my vibe, please do subscribe, check out my podcast and all that good stuff. But thank you so much for choosing to spend some time with me, and I hope this video was informative. But wherever you are in the world, I hope that you have a lovely day, and that you remember that you are a blessing to yourself and to those around you.